the Radio Forest Podcast.
Hey, welcome. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. Robin Taylor Zander, you've got this brand new album, The Distance. Let me start out right away. Which Beatle is your favorite Beatle?
Oh, man. What a tough question. It's a tie between all of them. I mean, I don't know. You take one person out and it's not the Beatles, so I love all of them. That's my democratic answer.
I just thought I was hearing a lot of John Lennon influences, and you can say that.
Yeah,
you can say that about most music. You really can, because they're the basis of a lot of today's rock music and pop music. I just thought some of the melodies and the piano I just felt like there was more of a John Lennon theme. And I don't know if that was on purpose or just the way that it came out.
It's just the way it came out, probably, and also because I'm a diehard Beatles fanatic, and I grew up on that music, so a little bit of both, probably.
Is there backwards guitar on the song Time in Need? Is that reversed?
Yeah, that is. That's some Jimi Hendrix experience vibe there. A little back and a little Beatles from Revolver is kind of what we were going for there.
When you wrote the song, did you hear it reversed? How do you end up getting it backwards? Like, is it just something you try and you're like, well, that sounds cool? Or can you visualize a different style of a sound?
Oh, there's no visualizing the backwards. The actual performance, that was completely at random. And the idea actually came from a conversation with the co-producer of the record, Kenny Siegel, who suggested that I try something like that. And then we just did a few takes, and then we picked the best one. It's actually pretty... You can't hear what it's going to sound like until you actually flip it. And then when you flip it, that's when you decide whether it's keepable or not.
So now if that song makes a live set list, what do? Do you learn how it sounds backwards? Where do you start?
Well, you pull Jerry Garcia and you improvise, I guess. I'm not really sure. You kind of have to – the live performance is probably going to be a little different than the record just because there's so many – parts on the record that to cover. And I have a 5-piece band doing this record currently, so you can only do so much with 5 people. So you have to pick or choose. But we haven't done that song yet, and when we do, we have some decisions to make.
So you've got a 5-piece band, but this album is pretty much all you. You're doing every instrument, right?
Yep. So except for any overdubs you hear that are horns or a cello or a harp, other than those instruments, everything is me. So I do all the rhythm, drums, bass, guitar, background vocals, you name it.
Is that on purpose, or is that just sort of, I'll just start goofing around and let me play the drums? I've got an idea for a piano part, let me put that in. Or were you like, I want to do an album all by myself?
No, it was pretty much planned that way, partly because I didn't have the musicians at the time to call on. And also, if I did have the musicians, I would have had to pay them a decent amount of money to fly up to upstate New York for, an 8-hour session. So it really became more of out of necessity. I needed to do it on my own to make it happen. So we planned it out that way. We started with either a drum or a bass track and kind of build up from there after you get the piano and guitar down. And we just layered every song. All the songs you hear were recorded in that form.
Now, you've also played with your dad's band, Robin Zander and Cheap Trick, and you started, I believe, live with them playing drums, filling in for Dax when he was out. You've also done guitar and bass. So as a kid, where did it start? What was the first instrument? Because your dad also plays guitar. I don't know if everybody knows that because, you've got Rick, so obviously he's the guitar guy. You think of Cheap Trick, you think of his collection. But since is he a guitar player too? Is that where it starts?
Yeah, so before I joined, Cheap Trick was a 4-piece, and my dad has always played rhythm guitar in the band, but not every song has rhythm guitar. So there's some songs my dad would step out with just the microphone and lead, and then he'd play rhythm on the songs that required it. When I started playing with them, after I filled in for drums, they asked me to basically do all my dad's rhythm parts and background vocals and some lead vocals when needed. So that pretty much is my job in the band, unless I've had to fill in for someone when they're sick or something like that. For the most part, rhythm guitar has always been there. And I also double Rick on some things. So, some of the riffs that are in the songs that my dad wouldn't be playing on, I still play the riffs that Rick would be playing in double. So it sounds big. It sounds like Cheap Trick. I'm not up there soloing over things. I'm kind of just holding down the fort.
Yeah, but like I play a little bit of guitar, and if I don't play for a couple of weeks and I pick it back up, I'm like, oh man, I'm really lacking. So how do you have the time? How do you have the time to be passable for Cheap Trick? And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like you can hop on stage with Cheap Trick for drums, bass, or guitar. You don't have time to play those instruments every day. You're also making your own albums. You're also touring. Is it just natural ability?
Well, to get good at something, you have to put in the 10,000 hours, that whole thing. So I've done that with, most of those instruments. I've already put in that practice.
Wow.
So I don't really practice, consciously anymore. I can pick up and pick up where I left off, basically. If I'm off off the road for 3 weeks and I have to go and do a 2 months worth of shows, it's just like, you put your seatbelt on and, you take a ride kind of thing. It's just a normal everyday experience.
I've had the pleasure of meeting Cheap Trick a couple of times, and I will say this, especially about your dad. The nicest guys backstage, like even when the cameras are off and it's not necessarily like an official meet and greet, you can tell it's genuine, though. Did your dad give you any tips like, hey, this is how you treat fans? Or is it just his personality and that's how your family is, just warm, inviting, friendly? I never seen him pissed off or anybody in the band fighting. So is that something he told you, or is it just being around and absorbing all that?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, he's pretty much what you see is what you get, whether he's on stage or backstage or at home with his family. That's how my dad usually is. I learned just by watching them tour and perform how to go about doing things, and how you treat your fans and how you treat the job in general. So I kind of learned through watching. I was much more a visual learner than anything else, and that included how I learned instruments. I never really had lessons, or I didn't have my dad sit down and teach me things. I kind of just was left to my own, devices to see if I could pick up a guitar and strum out chords and piano, and I did. I picked it up and naturally started playing along to my favorite records that I grew up on. So it was a little bit of both. I definitely learned a lot from watching them.
Your family was based out of Safety Harbor for a long time. I live not that far from there in Sarasota, a little bit south of you guys. And I know I know Brian Johnson from AC/DC also lived or still does. And AC/DC, I mean, back with the Bon Scott days opening up for AC/DC. Do you have any conduit? Is there any line between you and AC/DC? Have you run into Brian? Surely your dad knows them. They're just such a secretive band. I don't hear anything about them.
Well, it's funny that you say that because, they're. I think he still lives part-time in Sarasota, and we're definitely friendly with Brian and his wife, and we see them at a lot of charity gigs, and occasionally they'll be crossing paths in the same cities when they're on tour, and they'll say hi. And yeah, he's a really great guy, Brian, and all those guys in AC/DC. What a legendary band. But my dad definitely, going back to the 70s when Bon was in the band, my dad was very close with AC/DC because they toured in the 70s back-to-back years for a lot of dates in the UK and in the States. So Cheap Trick and AC/DC go back to 1977. That's where that relationship started.
Now, another person I want to ask you about that I don't hear do interviews and nobody talks about, but you definitely know him. What about Bun E Carlos? What's he up to? Do you stay in touch? Is he completely split and done?
No, he's still part of the recording outfit. Technically, he's still part of the band, but he doesn't tour live anymore. So, yeah, he lives in Rockford, and he still plays occasionally locally in Rockford. He's not he doesn't do many interviews, I don't think, but he's still around. He's still kicking, still doing what he wants to do. I believe. Your
debut album, The Distance, out now, but I heard you might already have like up to 2 albums completed or ready to go. Is that true?
Well, I've got a bunch of material. Yeah, I just have to organize it and see which ones go where. But I have a bunch of originals that I've kind of stockpiled the past couple years. And I've got the second and third record pretty much. I just have to go in and record it. And once I do that, it should be coming out, hopefully, the second one by the end of this year. I'm hoping to just keep following up good music with good music.
It's RTZ, Robin Taylor Zander, new album, The Distance, out now. Robin, hey, thanks for calling me today, man. It's great to talk to you.
Hey, anytime. Thanks.